I thought I should quickly answer. Actually, it's a big park. No. Well, the audio was fine. But I mean, at least you have a bigger screen, because I have people like one of my coworkers, she always uses her car.
All right, well, welcome everyone. We're a few minutes after the hour here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Taylor McKay Bianchi, and I'm the Executive Director of Rural Schools Collaborative. I've got a little bit of a cold or allergies, 'tis the season, so forgive me today for sounding a little grumbly, but I couldn't miss this conversation. We're really excited to have you all here for our second annual Rural Teacher Corps Forum. So I'm going to give a little bit of context about this work and do some level setting. But before I do that, I'm really excited to share that we have a special guest joining today. Julia Cunningham is here, and I'd like to turn it over to her just for some quick introductions about her role and some hellos before we get started. So Julia, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm really grateful that you welcomed me and allowed me to say a few words of welcome. My name is Julia Cunningham. I am the recently appointed Director of Rural Engagement with the U.S. Department of Education. Have been in the role for about 5 weeks, and so I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I am a former rural teacher myself. I taught middle school writing in southwestern South Dakota for 4 years, so I feel like I'm back with my people being here. So thanks for letting me join. And I just want to give you a little bit of context about what my role is going to be. I'm really here to hear from you. So I want to know how I can support you, how I can uplift your work, how we can learn from you and the work that you're doing to support rural teachers and rural communities, because that is a passion of mine and it's a priority for the department. So you're really the ones leading the way, and we just want to figure out what we prioritize. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Let you know that we are here to support you however we can. And I will put my contact information in the chat, because I really do want you to feel free to reach out to me at any point, whether it's just to chat about what you're dealing with on a daily basis, whether you want to hear more about the work that we're doing, or brainstorm on ways that we can support each other. I'll put in my email as well as my work number, and please feel free to reach out to me at any point. Thank you again for allowing me to be here today. Thank you for everything that you do. You're really raising the bar for all students across the country, and I thank you for the work that you do. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. So exciting to have you here with us this morning, and looking forward to more collaborations in the future. It makes us feel like VIPs to have you here. I think you cut out just a little bit there in the middle, but you are amongst your friends. We understand rural internet and its pros and cons. So great to have you, Julia. If you folks have questions, she'll put her information in the chat, but it's an honor to have you with us today for this discussion. So a couple of reminders that John has graciously put for us on the slide. Please keep yourself muted throughout the process, and we'll have time for some open Q&A. But as folks are already doing, you can feel free to introduce yourself or keep the conversation going in the chat. And our RSC staff members are on today and will be responding to questions as they can as well. So I think, John, we can go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll start with just a little bit of level setting about what is a Rural Teacher Corps and what will we be discussing today. So a Rural Teacher Corps is sort of some internal language for Rural Schools Collaborative, but just so we're all on the same page, a Rural Teacher Corps is any intentional effort to recruit, prepare, or retain rural teachers. And the idea of this is that the model will look different in different places, and that's by design, because we want for folks to be able to partner with folks in their region, lean on their local assets, and make sure that it's an initiative that works for them. But I thought we'd also talk a little about why this is important. And I know I'll be preaching to the choir here briefly, but when we talk about the teacher shortage, there is that additional layer of not just a teacher shortage, but a rural teacher shortage. And as we know, amongst that, there's even more nuance there, whether it's teachers that are certified in STEM fields, special ed, English as second language teachers. There's a lot of different challenges in the teaching field in general, and we all know that rural can also kind of compound that too. So not only is it great to help address the teacher shortage, but getting those young people or even second career folks into rural towns also brings that social capital, that vitality, and we know that rural schools are really the center of their community, so we can invest in great rural teachers. What we're really doing is investing in the future vitality of those rural communities. Similarly, we often know that these rural schools tend to be some of the largest employers in where they're based. And so there is a really direct economic tie to making sure that your school is strong. When parents or folks are thinking about moving to a new community, they're often looking to see what is the rating of the schools, will I be able to raise my kids here? And so it's all really intertwined. And so that's why we at Rural Schools Collaborative and many of our partners are laser focused on creating sustainable rural communities, but really coming at it through that lens of supporting rural teachers and supporting rural education with the belief that all of that ripples out to strengthen rural communities as a whole. John, you can go ahead and go to the next slide here. Okay, so we talked about Rural Teacher Corps as sort of an umbrella term that can encompass a lot of different things. So you may be familiar with Grow Your Own programs or other initiatives. Some of our higher ed friends often are doing this work through TQP grants. This is sort of the umbrella term that will talk about all of the work that we're doing together collaboratively to recruit these teachers. But the idea is that there's some common elements that might typically make up a Rural Teacher Corps. So we talked a little bit about that place-based design. We want it to be responsive to where the community is rooted and where these teachers will be teaching. We also really look for that asset-based framework. So a lot of the work that we and our partners at Rural Schools Collaborative are doing is to really address that national narrative that rural is at a lack, or that, there's nothing for you in rural if you're young, and really instead taking that asset-based framework of celebrating rural teaching as a career, getting folks excited about it, saying what's wonderful about being a rural teacher in a rural community. Very often the word core may imply this, but a lot of folks will design these initiatives in a cohort model so that these future rural teachers or current rural teachers feel a sense of belonging, community. Maybe it's an affinity group that higher ed folks have on campus. That sense of community will also help the students be successful as they think about getting into rural teaching. And there are definitely roles to play for both community members, the folks in the K-12 sphere, as well as higher ed, philanthropy, economic development. So whether that looks like rural teacher scholarships, stipends, loan repayment, there are lots of different ways that we can come together to help support these rural teachers. And very often having rural specific curriculum or rural specific professional development is something that makes a rural teacher corps distinct and helps prepare those teachers to be leaders in their communities once they're placed in these fields. We'll talk a little bit more about that collaborative model today. You're going to hear from 3 amazing examples of folks who are doing this work, whether large or small, whether new or old. There's definitely a seat at the table for all of us. So looking forward to talk more about that collaboration piece. And John, next slide. So for growth and opportunities, I could barely fit all of our logos here on this, but this is not just a Rural Schools collaborative project. In fact, the Community Foundation of the Ozarks are some of the folks you'll hear from today, and they've been doing this work for more than 10 years and have got some great data about its effectiveness in their own community. But we are really here to kind of bring these ideas out into the world and to bring folks like you who are interested in these ideas together. So some of these programs you see on your screen, we've certainly helped start, we've certainly helped fund, but some of them we just became friends with along the way. And so we're calling this our learning community of Rural Teacher Corps. And that's all of you folks that are here today. And there are folks that are interested in this work who aren't even represented on this screen. But we can tell that over the last couple of years, interest in this is growing. We know it's necessary, we know it's working. And so that's part of why we're really excited to have this conversation today, both learn from folks who are doing it and also get some Q&A for folks who may be interested in doing something similar in their communities. I do think that while we've had a lot of success for getting folks to focus on rural and rural teachers as a celebration moment in their programs, there's also still a lot of work to be done, whether that's thinking about how do we diversify the rural teacher pathways, how is that a part of this conversation, whether it's how do we fund this type of work and make it sustainable, or whether it's, how are we reaching out even earlier than higher ed into those middle and high school classrooms and pathways. So really just a great open forum today to talk about that continuum. But we are so excited to be able to represent a network of folks doing this great work and doing everything we can to bring in resources and support for folks who want to launch this type of work. So I could talk all day about this, but I'll go ahead and take a step back and turn it over to my colleague, John, who will guide us through the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Good morning, everyone. If you haven't had a chance to meet me yet, I'd love to meet you. My name is John Glasgow. I'm the Partnerships Manager here with Rural Schools Collaborative. And so in addition to taking a lead role with working with our partners across the country in our 14 different regional hubs, I also have the really great honor of working more intimately with these Rural Teacher Corps programs, getting people connected, supporting them in however that we need to. And so I just wanted to say, just a couple other brief words, and I'll run through our agenda for today. As much as this time and space is about information, it's also about taking a deep breath and celebrating. This isn't easy work; it's challenging. I think all of us recognize that in our day-to-day, lives, that what we're facing is real and it's heavy. But this is a time to really reflect on the good work that we have been doing, what we've accomplished in our own local areas, but also together. As well. And, it's a chance to really see and learn from our peers across the country. And so there's 2 little exercises here that I like to throw out just to ground us and recenter why we come together in the first place. So on the one side of the screen here is this fun little graphic of the 3 sort of values that I think this forum represents. One being community, that this is a space for us to come together, like we've been saying. It's a learning community to hear from each other, to share ideas. But also recognizing that everything that we're doing is rooted in specific people and places that we come from. This is also a time of celebration, mention that as well. It's recognizing and applauding, the progress we've had so far, that we made toward bolstering rural education and rural teachers. But it's also recognizing that with celebration, that there's always work yet to come. And that's sort of the point for coming together here. And so then the last bit relatedly is growth. That hand in hand with that celebration, this is an opportunity for each of us in our individual work, but as a network to grow stronger together, right? To really more clearly understand our work and define a path forward. The other thing on here, I am unashamed. I love maps. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And so I just put together this nice visual of where these Rural Teacher Corps programs that we've supported are, but also folks that we've had the opportunity to connect with. Now, this isn't everybody clearly, but it just goes to show that you know, we really are making an impact. We're starting to cover a lot of rural territory here, and the more that we can continue to work together and mutually support each other in this work, the stronger, you know, I think all this will become. So with that, here's just a quick rundown of today's event. So we're going to start off with about 30 minutes of panel presentations. I'll give a nice little introduction to Beth Hirsch from the Ozarks Teacher Corps and the Community Foundation of the Ozarks in Springfield, Missouri. Then Jamie Lynn Gunderson from California State University, Chico with the CLASS program. And last but certainly not least, Dave Dallas at Eastern Oregon University with their Oregon Rural Teacher Corps out in La Grande, Oregon. So with that, Beth, I will invite you to come on. I'll say a few nice words here. So Beth is the Director of Scholarships at the Community Foundation of the Ozarks, where she awards recipients, she validates documentation, and she renews adherence and disbursement of funds to the educational institutions that their students go to across the country. She also works with a team of colleagues to collectively promote their legacy 13-year-old rural teacher corps, the Ozarks Teacher Corps. And I just want to underscore again that, you know, much of how Rural Schools Collaborative understands rural teacher corps and a lot of our initial energy and good work came out of this work in the Ozarks. So it's really such a pleasure to invite Beth to come on this morning and share about her work.
Don, thank you very much. I really appreciate that introduction and being here with all of you today. John sent us some prompt questions, and one of them is to say where we're from. I'm, as John said, Community Foundation of the Ozarks, but I have someone that I would like to introduce because the question was what inspired this, and give some history. And there's nobody better to do that than Dr. Julie Leith, who started our program. So I welcome Dr. Julie Leith, and she is going to give you that information.
Good morning, John. How are you? Hi, everybody. Taylor, I'm the old. Here we are, back at it again. Good morning, everybody. And it's nice to see so many people engaged with the meeting this morning. The Ozarks Teacher Corps was really, I'm not the architect of the Ozarks Teacher Corps. I put this in construction terms. Gary Funk, who was the original executive director of the Rural Schools Collaborative, was the architect. And I got to be, I guess, the job foreman, as it were, or whatever. It was my job to work with Gary to ensure that we were out in our rural communities. And this was really the outgrowth in 2009, we launched what's known as the Rural Schools Partnership, which was really a precursor to the broader based Rural Schools Collaborative that you all are involved in. It was the beginning of the beginning, as it were. And so as we began working across Southwest Missouri, and the Community Foundation of the Ozarks cuts a swath through the state of Missouri, really anything south of the Missouri River, and I don't know how many counties now that is, 50 some odd, I think. It's a huge piece of the state. But we recognized as we began to engage more and more with rural communities that really the linchpin of that was the schools. I mean, that was the cornerstone of these communities. And if the school district was viable and strong, then typically the small community was pretty viable, to be quite honest. And so, and you almost got a sense, as we called it, going down the philanthropy highway, as we went down the philanthropy highway back in the early 2000s, it became very apparent to us. Well, so we started the School Foundations as a way to try to embrace the schools and connect them with the community foundations, and get the community foundations and the school foundations and all those communities like your figure there, John, to get everybody to work together. But it became very apparent that we needed to also build a strong core of teachers, that we had to do something that would help ensure that that we were getting the best we could to help keep those schools viable in those communities. So we were fortunate at the Community Foundation of the Ozarks to have at that time a scholarship that was unrestricted. That was a bequest. And that scholarship is worth now about, I think, 1.9 million, isn't it, Beth? And that was it. That was the key part for us. And for so many of you, I know that sometimes sometimes inhibits getting something like this off the ground. But for us, it was really an impetus because we had the money, so we could take off from that point and try to build a program where we could go out and recruit teachers for rural schools. So in 2010, so we had the Rural Schools Partnership established, which was to support rural schools, place-based learning, as you've mentioned, all those types of things. And we launched the Rural Schools Ozarks Teacher Corps. Frankly, we started out, I think, primarily with students from Drury University at that time. It was it's a smaller institution, so it was easier for us to engage with the education department and sort of make the pitch for what we were trying to do. And so we had, I think, 7 or 8 in that first cohort. I can't remember, something along that line. But for Drury, we were able to offer $4,000 a year for the last 2 years of these kids' tuition at Drury. And that was a big deal. I mean, it was $8,000 in their pocket. They were already in a program where they were going into the education field. And here was someone saying, oh, let us give you some money. But here's the caveat: you got to teach for 3 years in a rural school. And all of these participants had themselves come from a rural school setting. They had graduated from a high school which is considered, rural. And so that is really how the program was born, as it were. And from there, the next year we added, I think, 8 and 8 and 8. Anyway, Beth and I, we were looking at the statistics this week, and it's well over 100 students now that have graduated from the program. Now on the website and I think Taylor, you mentioned this, but we did kind of Gary and his son and a couple of other people helped with a survey, really more than what I would call a formal study, but it did give us some good information from our teachers that had gone through the Corps or were currently in it, maybe getting ready to graduate, about how they how they viewed the Corps. Was it successful? I'm not going through that with you now. It's a little dated. We need to do something else. But at the end of the day, I would say, based upon that, we still had over 90% of the people that we had gone through our program and placed they were still teaching in a rural setting. Now, they might not have been in the rural setting they started in, but they were somewhere in the rural school systems and mostly in Missouri. A few have moved out of state, but they're still teaching and so on. So,
and I did put the link in the chat there if folks want to take a look at that. It's one of the few more longitudinal looks at these programs, because the Ozarks Teacher Corps is one of the longest running models that we're familiar with. So an interesting doc, although you're right, we do need to do an update here, but that's in the chat too, as you folks are taking a look. Go ahead, Julie.
I'm looking at what you had wanted us to cover, and I'm thinking we have, as you mentioned, Beth takes care of all the hard stuff, and we did try an experiment.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
we did try an experiment with MSU West Plains, and that was about 6 years ago. Where we tried to get, we did get students that were coming to West Plains out of high school instead of them being already a current college student. And so what we found is that those students were changing their career paths quickly, and so we went back to the structure of doing junior, and you have to be entering junior or senior year. And the scholarship is for 2 years, but we do have some seniors that come in not knowing about the program previous, or maybe just making their decision or whatever reason that they would have. But we have opened it up to 2 other schools. Like Julie said, our footprint is everything south of the Missouri River from west to east. So if anybody knows the state of Missouri really well, we have the Boot Hill, and so we take care of all of that. So we've opened it up to Southeast Missouri University over there in Cape Girardeau, and then also in Joplin. So the Missouri Southern, and then Drury here in town, and MSU here in Springfield. So right now we have a total of 7. We kind of went through, probably like everyone else, COVID kind of, we just were making changes. Julie was retiring. They turned it over to me, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, but we're gaining more power. So we're getting there. So we have 7 in the cohort right now, and we will be we're having awards right now for spring. So that will help students next year. So we have 8 openings. So do you have it?
No, I think the program, I would just say that for us, the challenge was always not being a higher institution. Not being a college or university. For us, it was, the challenge was, what are we going to do to make this relevant? Besides just giving them money, we have to do something that builds in the appreciation for rural, the appreciation for rural students, the fact that, and with all due respect, I've said this before, so it's nothing I haven't said before publicly, that most of the colleges and universities in our area are not looking specifically at the issues of rural education and what it means to live and work and be in these rural communities as a teacher or a student, frankly. So we felt like we needed help. And initially, I was sort of trying to figure out what made sense, to be honest, with my background, and that was fine. But along came, and I think I saw Nate was on here, along came Teton, and thank heaven for Teton, because we were able to collaborate with Teton Science and really get some top drawer professional development, place-based, rooted in the context of the communities and the places that these students that were in our program were from, and it was what we needed. I felt like to really, I think we all felt like to really kind of crystallize the program. So that has been a really very positive thing, and can't say enough good about Leslie and her crew and Nate when he was there. We really appreciated and still appreciate their working with us.
And we just came off a workshop this spring. We require the students to do a fall workshop and a spring workshop, which is usually an all-day event. So it was very well. It was, and we base it around the place-based works and things like that. And some students don't even know anything about that when they get into the program. They have no idea what that means or how that can help them in their teaching. And so that's been very educational for them and helpful, I think, too.
Well, Beth and Julie, I really appreciate you folks coming on to share about the history and how your model works. Hang around, we'll have some questions for you here shortly. But right now, I'd like to introduce Jamie Lynn Gunderson from Chico State University out in California to talk about the computational literacy across secondary settings, or CLASS program. So Jamie, just a little bit about her background here, is the Assistant Professor of Education and the Universal Design for Learning and Equity Faculty Fellow at Chico State University. So with a keen interest in classroom facilitation and technology, Jamie has served for decades in public schools and has filled nearly every position possible, including researching UDL, the Universal Design for Learning implementation at Chico State, in addition to being the program coordinator for Chico's accelerated rural MAT program, which is CLASS. So Jamie, if you don't mind, come on up and I'll get your presentation running.
Hi, John. Hi, Taylor. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity to totally brag about our awesome program that we have at Chico State. Again, I'm Jamie Gunderson, and I am the coordinator of the CLASS program. And I'll tell you a little bit about our program. And just to kind of, if anybody wants to follow along and take a look at these slides, if you scan this QR code with your smart device, you will be able to follow along. But all that to say, CLASS is a multi-semester program that encompasses a Master's of Arts in Teaching and a credential. And we offer several routes of credential. So we focus on the secondary setting, so that's middle or high schools. We partner in 5 rural districts around the area of Chico. And essentially, our students participate in a co-teaching residency. So essentially, they, and sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So there's so many things to brag about, but we offer a variety of credentials. So first, we offer English in the secondary setting. Like I said, we offer a math credential in the secondary setting, a science credential, and that can span biology, chemistry, physics, geoscience, foundational science, all kinds of things. And then we also offer, and we're really, really excited about this, we're one of the first programs to do this, we're offering a dual special education credential. So our students can elect to receive both a mild, moderate, or an extensive support special education credential, and that is a K-12 credential. So these are students who can pretty much teach special education across any environment. And so that's what we offer. What is unique about our program is that our students are residents, so they don't follow the traditional student teaching model. We start in the summer with our students, and we work with the mentor teachers. We work in collaboration with the administrators and the rural school district staff to make sure that our mentor teachers and residents are paired according to personality, to interests. You know, we just want that to like vibe. It's kind of like a marriage. And we start that work in the summer, and we really focus on pairs training. So really establishing those relationships. We take the candidates through co-planning and co-teaching and strategies, how to do that successfully. We even talk with residents and mentor teachers about how to have what we like to call slippery egg conversations. So we really use that summer to prime those relationships to make sure that those placements are supportive. From there, our candidates start the day the teachers start. They are on campus and they're supposed to be up teaching, planning, and doing everything a teacher would do from day one. We don't want our residents to be seen as like observing or assisting in any way. They are jumping in teaching from the first day. So it's kind of unique about our program. Another unique piece is, as part of the master's component of our program, our students have to also do research, action research within these placements. And so what this, how we kind of tie this into the grant is through argument-driven inquiry. So this is a pedagogy where we have our students kind of provide their students a prompt or an essential question, and then guide the students to develop arguments, cite evidence contextually to support their arguments, and then bring those arguments to the class to kind of help, just really make connections and through curiosity. And so we're really big into that. So our candidates are trained in argument-driven inquiry throughout the program. They do research in argument-driven inquiry in their placements. And then they actually come out of our program with a certification to serve as a trainer for argument-driven inquiry. So as they get hired in these rural spaces, they can train other people on this type of pedagogy. So that's pretty cool. But all that to say, if you can click the next slide. Here's kind of some numbers and some data from our program. So we are in our 4th year of a 5-year teacher quality partnership grant. This is the third iteration of a grant like this from Chico State. So we previously had the Rural Teacher Residency Program, we had the RISE program, and now we have CLASS. So this currently we are working with cohort 3. They're getting ready to graduate with their masters and their credentials. And they're currently working on their research and all that fun stuff. But here's our numbers. So between cohorts 1 and 3, so the past 3 programs, 90% of our graduates are still teaching, which is great. We love that. And 45% of those are teaching in rural spaces. So we'd like to see our students kind of navigate to those spaces, but some kind of elect to go a little urban on us. And I'm from Las Vegas, so you can't hate on that. But 45, nearly half of our residents stay in rural spaces. And that's pending our current cohort of data. And I have to say these residents are getting hired every single day, which is it's awesome. My job at this time of year is literally just references and positive calls and all this fun stuff. They're getting hired. And a lot of our students this year, I know of 4 right now who have been hired at their sites where they're doing their rural residency. So that's exciting as well. We have most of our students stay in California and then they disperse to other states. Presently, our current cohort, we have 4 special education candidate or residents who are getting that dual credential, which is super exciting. This will bring our total to 7 special education candidates total. And then we're also bringing into our program 3 additional. So we'll come out of the program of this grant with 10 dually certified special educators in rural spaces, which is awesome. But in addition, we have 5 science, 2 of those are chemistry, 1 is bio, 1 is earth, and 1 is foundations for our math and for our English. Like I said, these folks are getting hired every day. And here's a great little picture of our current group. And then we just did interviews and we hired, or not hired, so we just did interviews and we selected our next cohort. So this will be our final cohort of the CLASS program. We have, like I said, we'll have 3 dual special education residents, 5 science, so 4 biology and 1 geoscience, 4 English and 3 math. And those folks actually will come to orientation next Wednesday. Hopefully we don't scare them away with all the requirements that we talk about on the first day, but then they'll start their journeys with their mentor teachers and we'll start facilitating that relationship. And so John, this next slide is for you because you said you love maps. Here's just a little visual representation of where our cohort residents are currently. And so, like I said, just some highlights, almost 24 of the students are currently teaching in Northern California, which is our area. And our area of service for Chico State actually spans, it's about the state of Ohio, size of the state of Ohio. It spans all the way to the Oregon border. So there's a lot of rural space to be taught in there. And if you'll click our next slide, John. So a couple of highlights because we just went through accreditation at Chico State and we were so excited because we met all standards with no conditions. So we're stoked. We're riding high over at Chico State. But some of the highlights that we have that came out of accreditation were that of our 42 total graduates from our program, that's cohorts 1, 2, 3 currently, 20 of those educators are STEM educators, which is awesome. And then of those 20, 14 of those are women in STEM. So let's hear it for the girls. Yeah. And then of those, 8 of our women actually identify as women of underrepresented or minority groups. So we are really excited to be offering these types of opportunities for all, really. So we love everybody. Anyways, a couple of things that we also wanted to highlight. Our students, like I said, they do research and their research focuses on argument-driven inquiry. But as we're getting into reading that research and looking over those abstracts and they're doing their writing, I am just super proud of the themes that I'm seeing in addition to ADI. So our cohort is big on diversity, equity, and student identity. So we're really being mindful of inclusivity and promoting equitable practices. Our students are into social emotional learning and growth mindset. So they're all about building better humans. They are especially interested. There's 6 or 7 of our candidates who are researching really just fun and creative ways to enhance the student learning experience. We have students focusing on assistive and instructional technology through ADI. And then we also have students who, from the science field who are really focusing on increasing their environmental consciousness of their students through their research. So I just can't say enough great things about our program and what we set out to do and how we're doing that in rural spaces. And if you'll click our next slide. This is my wonderful cohort here with a funny picture. This kind of captures our culture, I would say. And on here, I linked our email for our project director, Dr. Jennifer Olaf Lewis. She is amazing. She is the reason that this grant was funded, and she is our leader. And then I also have my email if you ever have questions or want to come out and see what we do, or just want to chat. I am always open to hearing from you. So thank you so much, John and Taylor, for having me.
Thank you, Jamie. It's so good to see you today. What a busy time for you folks, but super exciting as well. Glad we got to hear some. Like with Julia Beth, stick around here. We'll have some questions for you in a second. But now I would like to turn it to our final panel presentation for today. Dave Dallas from Eastern Oregon University in La Grande, Oregon, runs the Oregon Rural Teacher Corps. So a little bit about Dave. Dave, I'll invite you to come on up. Dave is a senior instructor of education at Eastern Oregon University, which had the honor of being classified as Oregon's rural university by a gubernatorial decree a number of years ago. Dave himself has spent much of his career serving in dual roles of both public school education as well as being college faculty, first in New Mexico before moving eventually to Oregon, where he continued classroom instruction before joining on at Eastern Oregon University as a senior instructor. So Dave, I'm going to get your slides pulled up here, but we're super excited to welcome you.
Thank you, John. And just to let you guys know while he's doing that, I'm in a unique situation because I teach in La Grande. I also teach in our program. EOU has a satellite campus in Gresham, which is an eastern suburb of Portland. We also have a hybrid program, which allows students in our rural areas to be able to experience a cohort and take their classes while at home, but they are all meeting together at a specific time in the evening. So I liken it to night school on the internet. And I'm in a unique situation because I also live outside of Sisters, Oregon. And so I commute up to La Grande usually once a week. That's a 5-hour drive one way. So it is a unique situation for me. And we are kind of in a unique situation in the fact that we are a small regional university. The closest Oregon school to us is 250 miles away. So at times we kind of feel like we're on our own out on the eastern side of the state. We are the only independent university that is on the eastern side of the state, and we serve the entire state, but the region of east that is considered Eastern Oregon, which is east of the Cascade Range here, is basically 2/3 of the state of Oregon, or about the size of Ohio, a little bit larger than that, maybe even the size of Missouri, with about a population, if you factor in Deschutes County, where I live, we have a population in this area of about 400,000 people. So if you can imagine Missouri with 400,000 people, that's kind of the area we're looking at. So in terms of access, as well as being able to get to resources, we are under a unique situation where our teachers are a lot of times very isolated. I have several teachers that are in districts that have one-room schools that are basically serving ranches in 2 of our counties. Within our area are 2 of the largest counties in the United States with the least amount of population. So this past year, the way that this got started, it is part of what we call Teach Rural Oregon, and I'll get into that in a minute. But as most great ideas in Oregon start, it started over a beer with the dean of the College of Education. And we decided we were trying to figure out ways on how we could best serve rural teachers as well as recruit rural teachers or teachers into our rural area. And so that was the beginning of that. So John, if you could start the next slide. Okay, and Teach Rural Oregon aims to recruit a diverse student teacher population, both first generation. And I think it's important to understand diversity in Oregon can mean very different things. And even the west side of the state with the east side of the state can mean very different things. We tend to, the diversity, if you're looking at an ethnic diversity, tends to be highly Hispanic. With many migrant populations in our areas close to the Columbia and Snake Rivers. However, within that diversity, we also see rural as being part of that diversity as well because of the certain isolation that many communities come across in those areas. We are a grant-funded program through the Oregon Department of Education. It is a Grow Your Own program. And John, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. This past year, RSC was kind enough to give us a Catalyst grant, which I then utilized to get some matching grants to start the Oregon Rural Teacher Corps. And basically, we chose to use this and focus in on our MAT candidates. And part of the reason for this was that the majority of our MAT candidates are in rural areas. Many of them, in terms of our MAT population, our Masters of Arts in Teaching population, are 40% are already on restricted licenses. And the majority of those are located in very rural or isolated areas. Within that, we decided we did not have a mechanism to provide financial assistance for our MAT candidates. So I felt like the most important thing was to offer them financial assistance and really focus it on teachers that chose to do their student teaching experience in rural and underserved communities in Oregon. So just a backstory on our MAT program. It is a 4-term program. It starts in August with a 1-week residency in LeGrand, where our cohorts come together. We usually have 1 elementary cohort and 2 secondary cohorts, usually made up of between 20 and 30 students. They come from a wide variety of places, not only from Washington and Idaho, but pretty much every county in Oregon. In fact, we have students on the coast that commute over to LeGrand for this program. So many of those students, in some cases, are commuting 12 and 13 hours away. One of the students I worked with specifically was in Tillamook. And so right along the coast, if you've ever had Tillamook cheese, that's where it originates. And he is in a very different situation than I am, both in my mountainous area as well as LeGrand, which is a much more rural farming area. He is still considered in a very rural area on the coast, though. And so we do have a lot of students that come from throughout the state to be part of our MAT program. Okay, John, if you could go to the next one, please. Okay, as I noted, our partnerships. When this came about, I went to 2 other foundations within the state of Oregon. The first one was the Ford Family Foundation, which is based out of Roseburg, Oregon. And the second was the Roundhouse Foundation, which is based here in Sisters, Oregon, to look at the possibility of them coming up with matching grants to meet the Catalyst grant that we received from the Rural Schools Collaborative. And additionally, I was also able to utilize the Educator Advancement Council for the Oregon Department of Education to provide us with additional funds to put towards providing students with some transportation money to get to LeGrand, as well as the ability to have some stipend when they are coming over, and additionally some classroom supplies in terms of books and other equipment that they might need in their own classroom. Okay, next one, please, John. Okay, so in terms of placement, ORTC was open to math teachers that were working in rural and underserved areas of Oregon. And the way I did that is I just simply went into the classification system that the Oregon Scholastic and Athletic Association utilizes to figure out their schools. And so I went into that first and looked at communities, because you might have a community like LeGrand that is in what would be considered a rural area, but in terms of the size of the school, it is much larger and has much more of the capabilities to serve both teachers and students that many of our large districts in the state also have. So I was really focused in on the smaller communities and the smaller school districts that existed in Oregon. Our placement office worked with candidates looking to teach in rural districts to find them a position in a qualified district. We did have 23 applications that were received for 12 positions. We lucked out. We actually had one student that was on a GI Bill, and so we were able to bring him into that without having to incur additional costs for that. And when you look at Oregon, when I am talking about Eastern Oregon, if you notice where the very dark brown ends kind of in that 2/3 there, everything along that mountain range there, the Cascades, which literally and physically and topographically divides our state, and in some cases people will also say politically, all of that to the east is Eastern Oregon, and that is kind of the area we were looking at originally. Although it must be noted, I have been really trying to work with educators as well in the western part of the state, because rural areas do exist in those areas, and they are also in some cases, due to topography or the geography of the state and all the mountainous areas, they are also fairly isolated from other population centers in the state. Okay, John, you go to the next one. Okay, so this is where our candidates came from, and you will notice that there were quite a few in what we consider kind of the Grand Run and northeastern part of the state. However, we did have a couple of these that were in the central part of the state, and I am hoping that next year we will have some over in the western part of the state. And these are those communities they came from, and many of those are probably not some that you have heard from, or heard of. I think the largest, as I look at that, is probably Umatilla, and it is basically a community of about 3,000. It's located very close to Hermiston, a much larger community, but it is right on the river there, on the Columbia River. If you do wish, we do have a website that you can look at a little bit further on here. And we also have Teach Rural Oregon has a number of other programs in addition to the Oregon Rural Teacher Corps. Okay, John. Okay, so basically what do we do? And I'm showing you a picture of one of our one-room schools in French Glen that we've utilized. Thank you, Taylor, for putting that in there. We provided tuition remission of $10,000 to each student. Okay, and that went over 3 terms. We weren't able to award the scholarships until the fall because we didn't know, and in some cases our placement was still occurring in August when many of these student teachers came on. It's also important to note that a lot of Oregon school districts, much like EOU, they do not start school until after Labor Day. And in fact, EOU, as are all the public schools in Oregon, is on a term, or what used to be called a quarter system. So we do not technically begin our school year until the last week in September, and we go until middle of June, which is part of the reason I can't participate in the upcoming summit in Springfield, which I'm a bit bummed by, but it's right in the middle of our graduation time. We did provide them with a stipend to cover travel, food, and lodging. Part of this was due to our professional development, which was occurring after our MAT weekends. And I did mention that our students come in for a week in August, but they also come in for a weekend one weekend in August, one in October, one in November, a virtual one in January, and then one in March, which coincides with our career fair. And then they also are expected to come in for graduation in June. So we wanted to provide them with some extra money as to make it affordable for them to come in and stay that extra day in LeGrand. We also provided each of them with $250 for a classroom library, and then provided professional development opportunities both on and off campus. And just a quick word about French Glen there. It is located, I have a junior that is getting ready to go do their field experience down in French Glen. It has 8 students, 1 teacher, and it is 60 miles from Burns. It is known for having traffic jams of both antelope and cows. And when I told my student that's from Portland about that, they kind of laughed, but then I reminded them that last year we had a student that was late to class because they had to wait for an antelope herd to get off the road. So one of those unique things that's always fun. Okay, John. Okay, so in terms of professional development, we, at the conclusion of our weekends, we would meet and come together. And one of the things that we did throughout this was a book study and discussion of teaching in rural places, which came out about 3 years ago in the midst of the pandemic. There are several teachers that were involved in this that I have become friends with, and I appreciate the fact that they kind of took this on and created this wonderful book that was a great springboard for our teachers, because all of these teachers were already in their classrooms, already in their communities, really becoming part of that. It allowed the teachers to share concerns, successes, issues that each were facing. They were able to discuss career goals and assist in future placement. And then it also, we made sure we had time for team building in a social setting away from campus, be it, meeting up for bowling or meeting at the local watering hole, or utilizing our new climbing facility. We tried to do something in addition to that to kind of bring that esprit de corps in amongst our students. Okay, John. Okay, so upcoming, we have our graduation celebration in June. I really want to make this something that the students feel like that they are part of. We've gotten special stoles made for them that they can wear at graduation. We are also working on the completion of a video on the ORTC. Currently, I have my videography team getting ready to go out and film 4 individual teacher stories that will be filmed during May. And these are kind of on that mode of the I am a rural teacher type thing that RSC as well as the NREA has utilized, but it's really looking at what they have done. And then interestingly enough, the current members have noted that they want to continue with this. This was in our last meeting that they came up with, we don't want this to end. We want this ability to continue to be able to be part of this. And so one of the things that they had tasked me with was the possibility of a rural education summit, which I'm now looking at trying to put together. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it this fall, but definitely during the fall of 2024. Now, I will note that we had one person missing in this picture. One of our moms that was also in the Rural Teacher Corps from Wallowa, Oregon, had her son was playing football the day of this, and he broke his collarbone. And as most people will know, rural hospitals sometimes are few and far between, and she actually had to drive to Boise to be able to meet up with her husband and her son. So she was not able to participate. So even during that time, it noted some of the issues that teachers face when they are choosing to teach in a rural area. Okay, John. Okay, so our future goals right now, we've gotten some attention from our Eastern Oregon Regional Education Network. or Educator Network. They are wanting to fund ORTC candidates in their overlay area. And their overlay area is Malheur County, which is, along with Harney County, is one of the largest counties in the United States. But they want to have teachers specifically from their area. So it is one of those things where the partners have said, you know, we want to make sure that these students are coming from our area and making that available for them. We also, as I noted, wanted to recruit and place ORTC members in rural parts of Western Oregon. And we also want to secure funding for the continuation of the program. I've already applied both with Roundhouse and Ford Family Foundation again for this. I'm also working with the Department of Education on a specific fund for that. And then, as I noted, the potential for a rural education camp summit on campus based on a request from the current ORTC members and seeing what some of the other rural hubs are doing. And I think that would be a wonderful way to do that. It's now just figuring it out, which seems to be most of what I've been doing with this. And so the picture there is a picture of the French Glen community of French Glen and the French Glen School. And as you can see, it is pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. But it is a wonderful and beautiful area. And interestingly enough, those students that go past 8th grade there then are move over to Crane Union High School, which is about an hour and a half away. And those students actually lodge at they have a dormitory there, and they actually lodge and do their high school there in a dorm setting. And then they come back to French Glen and the ranches during the weekends. Okay, next slide, please, John. Just included a couple of unique things. One is a school out in Lakeview, Oregon. And then the other, you know, some of those things that you don't necessarily see in an urban classroom. I had one of the schools I was working with in Elgin that had a candidate there. I was with the principal and I saw this girl walk by and had a lamb following her. And so I asked him about this, and this was in December, and he was like, it just kind of showed up. Well, I went in and talked to the teacher. Her husband is the director of the FFA, and she was saying that their sheep and their goats were getting ready, you know, to give birth for the showing goats and lambs. And this one had a mother that wouldn't let it nurse. So they had to take it in and nurse it. And then when it came to what do we do for the next 2 weeks until Christmas break with this lamb that's on its own, she was like, well, I guess it could be a classroom pet. So a unique classroom pet that we found. All right. And I think that there may be one more. Yep. And so just a couple of things. The picture there of the rough road is taken in Wallowa, Oregon. The other one is out in the Grand Ronde Valley with the Eagle Cap Wilderness in the back.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for sharing a bit about, there are great progress over the past year, specifically with the Oregon Rural Teacher Corps. I know it's been exciting on my part to work with you and the other Catalyst cohort. Just a word about that, our Catalyst Initiative program offers some flexible early seed funding to 4 institutions around the country that are interested in doing these sort of rural teacher corps. And it was made possible through a generous anonymous donation to do those funds. So very happy to have been working more closely with Dave. Thank you to all of our panelists. Go ahead, Taylor.
I also just wanted to add a note on that too. The Catalyst, we have some Catalyst Initiative alums on the call with us today who have launched their own rural teacher corps as well as some folks in our current cohort. But we have so much more interest in that program than we have dollars to serve. So I think that in addition to the ways in which folks are working with their local community foundations and foundations to help fund this type of work, there's a real need on the national philanthropy side and regional philanthropy side for additional flexible dollars educators to start projects like these, because in order to design them in a way that is sustainable, you need time to kind of figure out how are we going to keep this funding going so it's not a one and done. So just a shout out to you folks in philanthropy who are doing the good work. And also, if you know any philanthropic minded folks that want to support work like this, send them our way. We've got a deep interest in that project and are so thankful to be able to start some of this work. So go ahead, John. I'm done with my spiel.
No, we love it. I'm just going to open it up now for questions from the audience, for our panelists. I have one or two I'd like to get us kicked off with. Today's theme is all about sort of program sustainability and really building those foundations to keep these programs going on into the future. And that's why we were so honored to invite Beth and Julie, Dave, and Jamie here, since all three of those programs have shown a real tenacity over the years to continue to innovate and bring new partners into the work. So to ask each of you, I'll let you all decide who wants to go first. I'd like to just start with, what does sustainability mean to you in your program, and how have you sought to realize it? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I mentioned ours. I won't take much time. I mean, we're very fortunate that we have an endowed fund that supports our program. And to date, I think in terms of just the Ozarks Teacher Corps, that's approaching about $850,000, plus the fund's still worth almost, worth a ton. So we're very fortunate. And so the sustainability issue is taken care of. Really, for us, it's a matter of how to keep the program viable with those funds.
John, I think I'm going to approach the question from like two different angles. So financially, I know Chico State, one of the things that we're looking at is applying for another grant to kind of continue our iteration of this program. And specifically, we want to battle kind of the retention issue from a different angle. We were hoping to create educators who are more able to metabolize some of the traumas that they're seeing and experiencing in the classroom, so that those don't affect, their livelihood, their happiness, and their time in the classroom. So hopefully, one of the things that the class program has brought in is a focus on secondary trauma education. So thinking about ways that teachers see trauma and kind of take that in, and how that can build up and cause issues over time that, lead to burnout amongst other health related things. And the reason we're really focused on that work is because our area has one of the highest ACEs scores, so adverse childhood experiences. And we are also, and I'm personally a survivor of the Camp Fire, and we've had floods, and with the pandemic, there's a lot of like collective and very personal traumas for our area. And so we are finding that sometimes teachers are leaving the field because of they're not able to work through those things, or they don't know how to seek resources to support some of the feelings that they might be having. And those behaviors trickle into the classroom, right? So how do teachers stand in that classroom, in that space, and be supportive, healing centered, and mindful of how the students themselves are experiencing the traumas around them? And so all that to say that our future iterations of this grant, obviously financial component is a part of the sustainability, but we also want to create educators that are strong and able to kind of flex and move with these changing contexts, especially in our space where, like I said, we have the highest ACEs scores in the nation in some of the counties that we serve. So that is another way that we're kind of looking at, maybe building our pipeline up from the inside, if you will.
I will be upfront. The way I'm approaching it right now is just trying to get through the next week. And I say that because in addition to what I'm doing here, I also teach a full-time load at EOU. We are a small school. We are going through a presidential search right now. And so I think with that in mind, there is hope that, and our current interim provost is the former dean of the College of Ed, who I worked with to develop Teach Rural Oregon. So there is hope that with that, we can begin to get the word out more on this. I was stunned this past week. I was listening to OPB, Oregon Public Radio, and our marketing department put something on. Granted, it was like at 6:30 in the morning, but it was, as they go through the morning report, it was this just a quick blurb about EOU being Oregon's rural university. And within that, Teach Rural Oregon was noted. And all of a sudden I had someone contacting me about this. And so I think part of it is just getting the word out about what we're doing, trying to see what districts are needing, how we can, as a teacher or educational preparation program, assist them, how we can also work with other areas. And I'll note, for instance, Chico. I was talking with someone down at Southern Oregon University about some of the programs, and I said, I would really encourage you to look at what's going on at Chico to see if they might be able to assist you. And it's not that we don't want to, but frankly, Ashland is much closer to Chico than it is to LeGrand. And so I think it's important that we don't kind of silo ourselves or become very to the point where it's just mine, and that we need to see what's going on with others, as was noted with the Teton School, and utilizing the resources for the people that have already done the work. And I think the reality is now for me with sustainability is, how do I look at our area, and I will say Eastern Oregon, in terms of economic influence in large corporations. Most of our money in our area is focused towards either Boise or Portland. And so our areas, and we do have some like Amazon and a couple of corporations that have formed in our area, but I will also say some of that money has also gone away. And I know Amazon has made kind of a decision that they are not going to be as forthcoming with their funding as they had been in the past. And so I think, does that mean now looking at how do we work with foundations that may not have the deep pockets, but how do we also work with other foundations throughout the state in getting the information out? We're not just, for Eastern Oregon, we're for rural areas in the entire state. And that is our real focus. So I think sorry, that was not the most succinct manner, but that's kind of where we are.
No, I love it, Dave. Thanks for your thoughts. Thank you, all three of you. I think something that really stood out to me in each of your responses, and it's one reason why I love, working on this with you all, is that responsiveness and really letting community need and community voice lead sort of innovation and change, right? I have another question to follow, but just to shout out to everybody, feel free to throw questions in the chat. We're here to ask our friends here. There is one in the chat.
Did you see the one about
Yes.
PD? Okay, perfect.
Yep. There's been a couple in here, so we're going to get to them. One that I did see up here. Okay. There's a couple, so I'll kind of triage these in order that I think thematically they've kind of come up. So, we all serve sort of disparate regions here where folks are distanced, right? And some of us have hybrid models where you need to try and find a way to connect schools and educators across distance. And so I guess I'd just be curious to hear, what have been some of the challenges with, reaching folks at a distance with broadband access, with getting them connected to your institution, which may not be close to them at all, sort of building that community-based relationship, since we know that is essential for how these programs develop.
I'll kind of jump in real quick. We have really tried to work with our educational service districts as well as our regional educator networks to identify those areas. Additionally, we have started a new instructional assistant program, which allows, and this is more in an undergraduate area, but allows our instructional assistants to be able to be part of the hybrid program, give them money to be able to afford to go to school, allow them to stay in their current classroom and get their student teaching done in those areas. And then also just working to get the word out in those smaller communities. One of the things I will say we face, and this was, and if you're an ASU grad, I'm not, don't take it the wrong way, but we had a community college in Oregon that paired up with Arizona State University for online programs. And I think for us, it's frustrating to see when our districts go outside or give money to Western Governors University or Grand Canyon or some of the for-profits. Again, I'm not disparaging those, but it's frustrating for us when we are trying to meet those needs and meet them in those communities that are part of our state, when they choose to either go elsewhere or support something that isn't within the state, because then that ends up hurting us and all of our EPPs in the long run.
John, we really don't have an issue here in Missouri. I mean, we could have better broadband, and some of our rural schools, I mean, have issues with that, but who we're serving, you know, they're all in big universities for the most part, so we don't have that issue. So we're pretty fortunate there.
I would say kind of the same for us. When class began, our first semester was actually when COVID happened. So we did the rapid transition to distance learning. And, you know, we had to write in some funding for technology to support our residents so that they would still be able to, you know, go from a fully face-to-face, fully intended to be face-to-face program to a fully virtual program. And so we did that. I would say that the university is positioned well because we have a lot of technology. And so over the course of the last few years, we've been able to transition back in pieces from a full, you know, face-to-face to virtual to now we're in a kind of a mostly face-to-face, but with the option of Zoom and hybrid meeting attendance if needed. But yeah, like I said, the university, much like Beth's group, is well positioned to provide that technology. But we do have issues with our school districts not having as big access. And so that's just an issue more of, you know, kind of the social justice theme that, you know, our candidates experience and they talk about, but not specific to our service in the grant, I guess you could say. Maybe it should be something to think about.
That's what we're here for. Give us all something to think about. I appreciate that, folks. Taking a step back a little bit, returning to sort of the core function of each of your groups. I know that you all take on professional development specifically for Rural Place in different ways. And so I guess I would just be curious to just hear a really short, maybe even bullet list of some of those key learnings or educational moments that each of your programs incorporate to really train and inspire educators to go out into a rural area.
I'll start. So our residents, the very first class that they take in the summer is really just focused on place-based education, and the text that we've been referencing throughout the day, Dr. Ann Schulte, big shout out. I don't know if she's here today, but she's amazing. And she's from Chico State. So she actually started teaching that class, and we just have, you know, now that she's retired, we have just taken the essence of what she created and carried it over. So in that, our students will spend kind of a good chunk of the summer in those spaces, and they'll have prompts and different things that they have to do, different reflections that they take them to. And all of that culminates into their research. So that becomes the context of their study. And so what this does is it gives our candidates, before they're actually teaching, it gives them time within those rural spaces to get to know the community, get to know the neighborhoods. And then from there, we just promote, getting active, maintaining that space in the community, becoming part of the school, becoming active in that culture. And that all themes into how they design their research.
I think we tried to incorporate the place-based element from the get-go, but really it took off when we connected with Teton. I think, in the university programs, there's all kinds of structure, but there really wasn't the structure for learning within the context of these communities. And I think the awareness that we've been able to incorporate into the program through the professional development has been that students often say, gosh, I didn't realize I could utilize so much. And I can remember Gary always saying he had a student one time that said, I just don't know what to do about science. I mean, and there was a stream outside the window. It was like, look outside the window. You can incorporate that type of place-based essence into your learning and teaching. So I think for us, it is trying to really enhance what's going on at the universities. And again, that's one of our challenges at the foundation.
I think much what was mentioned by Ozark, we, Teach Rural Oregon, worked with EOU's Rural and Engagement and Vitality Center to create a teacher institute, a place-based teachers institute that occurs at Cottonwood Canyon State Park, which is kind of a remote state park in Eastern Oregon. But it allowed teachers the chance to spend a week with EOU instructors learning about place-based education. And within that, I think just working with some of the state agencies, the GoSTEM programs, the various social and emotional centers within the state to provide teachers with resources. One of the things that I noted was, particularly outside of English language arts and mathematics, that a lot of districts are not preparing or not prepared to give their teachers adequate equipment and or materials for things outside ELA and math. And that ties into a lot of times the lack of assessment, national assessment that is occurring in that area. So districts become very focused in towards ELA and math, and the rest gets left behind. So I've really tried to work with ESDs and RENs and in my own teachers that I work with, to make sure they are aware of not only open educational resources, but resources within their communities, within their counties, within their districts that can assist them to really bring in place-based education that could be relevant for these students because they're seeing it. And I think one great thing about this was the Godsell, when we became a regional hub, the Godsell grant allowed us to acknowledge those teachers that are doing good things in those areas. And I think it has helped teachers understand that they do have the ability to do some wonderful things in their community, even if they only have 500 people.
I also want to note, I know we're getting close on time, but we've got some great comments in the chat here about different funding models for these projects. So feel free to check those out in the chat. The most recent is talking about designated apprenticeship models, which is new, but I will share that a couple of the folks in our network, including University of Tennessee Chattanooga, are working on this, as well as Missouri State University is investigating this, and probably even some others I don't know about yet. So it sounds like there may be an appetite to talk about that structure in a future conversation. information, but I also just want to note that part of what we hope to do at Rural Schools Collaborative is be those switchboard operators of, if you have a question that didn't get answered here, try and plug you in with one of our partners that we know is interested in that work, because when we work together, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and rural kind of all gets elevated together the more we can lean on each other. But another piece I did want to mention from the chat is that we do have some other rural teacher corps that have been successful at getting some of their programming written in at the state level funding as a permanent line item, including our Black Belt Teacher Corps in Alabama. So there are a lot of different ways to think about the funding and the sustainability of these programs. Today, you kind of heard from, the Community Foundation side that sort of started as that endowment and scholarship, and that's been going for 10 plus years. You heard about a newer program, CLASS, which is sort of a mix of some of those grants and different funding opportunities. And then you heard about the new WIST program, from Eastern Oregon, which is a small regional college and has that mix of both state level grants, but also regional philanthropy support. And some folks are just saying, we're going to just start and see what happens. We're going to just have a teacher club and it will cost $0, but we're going to just have students who are interested in rural talk to other students interested in rural. So I think what's so exciting about this model is that, there's a lot of different ways to fund it, whether it's large federal dollars, state dollars, local, regional dollars, whether it's partnering with college advancement offices or regional philanthropy, or whether it's just starting at a club to help support folks who are interested in rural. That all really excites me. And I really appreciate today's panelists for sharing their own perspectives on sustainability and the different funding models. But we're happy to connect you all to with our other partners who are doing this in various ways.
Thank you for that, Taylor. I think it's a good reminder that reach out. Our emails are on the Rural Schools Collaborative website. So are these three panelists here. They're listed under the Teacher Corps page, and I believe they're also under our regional hubs page. But yeah, if you ever want to ask any additional questions, we're a free and open network here, where it's all about community and just being genuine with each other. So I encourage you to do so. There's only a few more minutes left, so I have one final question for our panelists. We'll keep it kind of brief here. Within the theme of program sustainability, sort of building community and momentum for your work, what's one piece of advice you would give to a peer or somebody interested in doing this work about sort of building up that capacity?
I would say really involve your community partners. Our collaboration with our district leadership allows us to pick really great mentor teachers and really foster good connections. And now we're at a point where we are in our third iteration. And because we've built those strong connections, a lot of our former students are now serving as our mentor teachers for our current class program. And it's really just come full circle. And so the word is out that we, have really good candidates out there, and our really good candidates are now training our soon to be really good candidates. And so that wouldn't happen without the intense collaboration with our school district partners. So just super important.
I
would say to contact Teton Science School if you're going to do workshops within your teacher corps. That would be something that they could definitely help you with, or to connect them with you guys also.
I was just going to say, don't be afraid to come up with some outlandish things and get started. Again, as I noted, as most things do in Oregon, it involves beer. And so, that was kind of like, we just kind of threw it out there, and then it was like, okay, how can we go from there? And then I think once you do that, don't be afraid to let things evolve. Yeah. So for instance, I was thinking yesterday as I'm working on my budget for this next grant, I was like, you know what? I can put a little bit of money in just to fund, a small scholarship for our MAT teachers that choose to teach in rural areas that maybe aren't part of the core, but to, give them some financial support. And so I think sometimes it's okay to fail, and it's okay to go, okay, that didn't work well, and to go to the partners and say, okay, this didn't work. what would be good now, or what are some things, and also understand that those things are going to change. I know when we started this, it was in the midst of a pandemic, and now we're looking at, the potential of cutbacks in funding. And so how do we move forward? And how do we make people understand that this is important and is relevant?
Thank you, Dave. I'd echo everything you all said. Be brave. Think broadly. Aspire to something kind of grand, but starting small. Incorporate your place, incorporate your community. I think those are all great lessons in this work, but probably good lifelong lessons as well. We're at our time. I just want to say before I kick it to Taylor to really close this out, I will follow up with all of you all with an email with a recording of today. Feel free to respond with any questions. I can get everybody connected. But thank you to our panelists. It was such a great honor to have you here and hear about your programs. I know I work with all of you day to day, but it's always great to listen to the great things you do. And thank you to our wonderful audience who have been very active in the chat. I always love it when we can get a good lively chat. But Taylor, any final words you'd like to close us out with?
Just a thank you to our panelists, to our partners who are doing this Real Teacher Core work, to our board members, current and former, who started this work, to our regional hub partners who share their advice so generously with us, and also to our philanthropy partners who are really investing in this work. It's so important, really a national imperative for rural communities. So thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day. We appreciate it.